All right. Well, again, good afternoon and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I know it was supposed to be again 2 weeks ago, but thank you for being patient and joining us. No technical difficulties this time, so we're ready to get rocking and rolling. So welcome to the inaugural or the first Success Spotlight. So the purpose of the Success Spotlight is to bring current agents and current business owners that are utilizing the IdealTraits platform, and have them discuss their success and strategies towards seeing good results when it comes to staffing and recruiting, because we know it is such a difficult thing and everyone's experiences are different. So over the next several months, moving forward throughout the year, we're going to bring you different guests that will be able to share their experience that hopefully you'll be able to take things and implement into your process. So throughout the next really 30 minutes, I do have a series of questions that I have prepared for Rose, but if you do have anything that you want to ask as we begin the conversation, please feel free to use the Q&A tab that should be located on the left-hand side of your screen, I believe, to ask any questions, and we'll work to get to those too as well. But I'm super excited for our first inaugural episode with Rose. Rose is an American family agency owner out in Portland, Oregon, right, Rose? Portland, Oregon. Yes, sorry, I got that confirmation. In Portland, Oregon, she's been in the insurance industry for 7 years and just passed her first year as an agency owner, but has spent a lot of time in numerous different positions within the insurance realm. So super excited for her to talk about her experience, not only as an agency owner, but also as a new agency owner, because as you all most likely know, there are challenges with that too as well. So Rose is, of course, active in her community too as well, and then has 2 little ones, which I'm sure, Rose, will keep you incredibly busy at home too as well, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about too as well. But super excited to have you, Rose. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, no, of course.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, again, over the next 20 to 25, 30 minutes, we're going to talk about Rose's process success. One exciting thing that I'm sure she's going to talk about is she just had a new employee start last Monday. And I'm sure you'll talk about how that's going so far. But Rose, to open things up and about staffing and recruiting, I know I mentioned that you just hit your 1 year in January after opening your agency. So first and foremost, congratulations. I want to make sure I note that. But then also too, just talk about, as a new agent, how did you know, or how did you decide when it was time to bring someone on? I'm not sure if this is your first employee that you just brought on, but I'm sure you'll talk about that too as well. How did you know as a new agent, like, okay, now I need to hire, or I'm in that position where I have to bring staff on?
So when you're starting your agency, you have tons of ideas. You're like, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I'm going to have capital to do this or that, whatever else. But my decision was starting right away. With the experience that I had, I knew how long it takes to hire someone. So I was putting job ads and doing whatever I could right away. Even though I didn't have a lot of capital to pay them, I knew that it was going to take me a couple months to find the right person. So starting right away was my idea. And I told a lot of people that. I was like, I'm not going to, like, why are you starting now? I'm like, yes, it's going to take a while. You're not going to find someone right away. There's very little chance to do that.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point, because I think that might be a common misconception, right? Is that like if you start the process today, you'll have someone by next week, right? So talk to us about how much time you give you. Like, now you're in a position where you just hired someone, they just started last Monday. Like, what was your realistic time frame from when you started the process to, like, okay, if I find this person I know it obviously happened in January, February, but like, let's say if it didn't happen until March, like how much time did you give yourself to fill that position? Or was there just no time frame? Was it more of just like, hey, when it happens, it happens?
So for me, it was just more on the lines of, was I financially sound to take this person on? And then also too, well, I didn't really have a time frame. It was just, if I find the right person, I'm going to bring them on.
Yep.
Because the fact of the way is, when I talked with, senior agents and everything else, they would bring someone on and they would have them studying, and they're working in your office for about a month, and they'd have a deadline, you have to get licensed, or if they're non-licensed, you have to get licensed within that month. Well, I couldn't have someone sitting there and working because I wasn't able to have that capital to do that. So I had to have them licensed beforehand. And I would talk to them about that. And there was lots of people that are like, okay, fine. I'll get licensed. And then with the experience that I've had, it takes them a while to get licensed. So that's why I say you'll find a good person probably within your first month that's unlicensed. You're going to have to give yourself like a month or 2 months for them to get licensed unless you give them a deadline. If they're doing the licensing on their own without getting paid or anything else, it's really hard to give them a deadline. You just have to keep in touch with them. Every week, just like send out a friendly reminder. Hey, how's it going? What can I do to help out? Is there anything I can do to help out? How's your testing going? How's your schooling going? You know, just try to keep engaged, bring them out. Sometimes I would meet up for coffee or whatever else, just to touch base with them, just to be friendly and just try to figure out, you know, what could I do? But that was my best experience anyways.
Yeah. And I think that's important too, because I think, you know, of course, staying in touch with them is in regards to the engagement that you're having with the candidates, right? So I guess that buck doesn't really stop once they have, like you've said, hey, go get licensed and I'll hire you, right? You're continuing to engage with them throughout that process, because if you, I guess if you didn't, they would just lose track of it, maybe fall off, right?
Mm.
And maybe there's those couple of examples where they go through it independently without you checking in. They come back to you like, all right, I'm done, right? But I think that significantly lowers your chances of them coming back to you and being like, hey, I know you said I had to get licensed. I appreciate you engaging and offering support throughout the last, you know, however many weeks. Thank you. I'm ready to go now. I passed, right? So is that really why you continue that engagement? Because you know it will better your chances of them staying engaged and better the chances of them really going through with that process?
Yeah, so I've noticed that giving them that support and knowing that I'm here to help out as much as I can really and lets them understand that, okay, she's going to help me through the situation. This is a good employer. They're engaged with me. They're checking in. And then
Sure.
also too, I remember, you know, the frustrations that I had and not the support that I did not have. I was like, I wish I had the support that I'm trying to give to them. And I'll send them stuff. I'm like, hey, you know, I have a binder that's has it all printed out. Is it hard to do it digitally for you? Do you need to like read it hard copy? Um, there's notes in my binder too. Like I've had other testees where they've highlighted things and like, hey, study this. It's on the test. Study this, study this. I know the test changes, but if you have like tons of people doing that, then you have so much in there. Like, oh, okay, these sections they really need to study. And then also too, it's the systems like I use FF Exam, and then I also use what's it called? I'm sorry, it's the one you guys work with. Excel Solutions. I use both, and they usually send me emails on stuff like, "Hey, you can do this with your recruit. Hey, you can do this with your recruit," and they don't send that to the recruit itself. So you could be sending the stuff to them and saying, "Hey, you know, once you get your testing done, then you can take a 2-day course right before your test, and it's an online instructor thing and everything else. And it's like, hey, I will pay for that. If you want to do it and if you're really involved in this, I'll go ahead and pay for that. It's like $75. So what? You're paying for it. But that
Worth
lets them be that you're supporting them and you're engaging with them. And can't think of the other word I'm looking for. Sorry.
it. I think supporting and communicating with them is big, right? And maybe giving them reassurance, maybe the word that you're looking for, potentially that this is the right move for them. You know, they see you obviously communicating and engaging and reassuring with them. It gives them an optimistic viewpoint of, you know, seeing you, I guess, as an agency that they and as an agent that they want to work for and grow with. You know, is that fair?
Yes, exactly.
Perfect.
Um,
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're fine. No, with that, I did have I had one person that, you know, followed through with most of it. I did do an interview with you. I let her, you know, take the reins and go ahead and try to get licensed. She did all the studying and everything else. Um, she was right at the end where she got her certificate. She was going to take her test.
Sure.
And well, I really needed someone. I had to make that decision. I was like, okay, I'm just going to bring her in. All she has to do is take her test. So she came in, she took the test a couple times. She didn't pass. You know, there was nothing much I could do. I tried supporting her in every way. I also did I don't know if everybody uses this, but the PIS testing I did. So they have availability where you can take little courses or little quizzes. So you get used to the questions that you're going to take through PSI for the actual test. And I did that for her, but she still couldn't pass. So that was one of like, I did everything I could, but you can't always help everybody. And you've got to just, sometimes you have to move on, and that's the hardest part.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's super true, right? Because, once you have someone, I mean, with hiring, I think that there's solutions out there where they give you the best chance to find the right people. And I would imagine that since you were, helping them get licensed, going through all this effort, that, it matched up from a resume, interview, and assessment standpoint. But unfortunately, the last hurdle was just getting licensed, and it just didn't end up working out. So, that's, an unfortunate. But in terms of the person that you just hired recently, again, that just started a couple weeks ago, let's talk about that process a little bit. I guess when you're starting the process of looking for candidates, and as an Ideal Traits user, of course, we connected to the job boards as well as some other resources. But what are you using? Are you using anything outside of the job boards to help you get in front of candidates? Are you going into your local network? Are you posting on social media? What goes into that full process for you? Because of course, the first step really is creating a job ad, but then you got to get candidates to apply. So what do you do in order to fill your pipeline with candidates?
Well, I mean, I mostly use IdealTraits. I've posted a little bit on Facebook, and I do have my meetings that I go to and everything else, and I was letting people know that I'm hiring. But it, it doesn't always pan out. I mean, IdealTraits is the one place where I've gotten the most action when it comes to bringing in the new candidates. And it's mostly because to really put it in terms of us as insurance agents and everything else, I treat them as they are a lead. So I am on top of it. So I'm not, where I'm coming with that is I'm not going to hound them. I'm not going to chase after them like I would a lead. It's more in the lines, they come in, I'm going to be sending them an email instantly or within that day and letting them know, hey, I saw your resume, I'm interested, let's set up some time for a phone interview. But
Yeah.
it's usually within that day if I'm interested. I'm not going to let that just sit there and go, no, I'm not going to chase after them. I'm going to wait a couple days. No, go after them that day. I know it seems kind of like I shouldn't do that. I'm chasing them. No, they're in the market. Go ask them. See if it's a nice lead. I've always had a lot of success with that, is jumping on it right away, because I will get maybe 5 people that apply. I will email 5 of them. I'm only going to
Yeah.
get maybe 2 back, but at least I tried for all of them. So.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to steal that from you. That you treat them like they're a marketing lead. And I think that's so true, right? Because again, the candidates, they're on the job boards, they're not just applying to your opportunity. It seems as if you know that, right? So, and have a good understanding of that, which is why that efficient engagement has bettered your chances of scheduling more interviews, which gives you a better chance of hiring more people, which seems to be a good correlation. Now, you mentioned that a majority of the results that you've gotten have come in through the jobs that you've posted to the job boards, which is great. They're, of course, the job boards are a great resource. And at Ideal Traits, we, of course, believe that recruiting is an and not an or. So it's good to hear that you're using Facebook and other things alongside that too as well. I'm sure that that attributes to your success. But when it comes to you creating the job ad, what do you, I guess, what do you consider to be the reason why your job ad has performed well to where you've gotten a good amount of candidates to be able to suffice the need to be able to schedule those interviews?
I think what really changed for me is when I changed my job ad. I actually saw a video that popped up with you guys, and it didn't really give me the resource, but I kind of paused the video of where it showed the resource. And it
Sure.
was really, it was the description. So the description is your biggest thing. Like, they're going to look through the requirements and everything else, kind of. But most job boards now, what it'll do is it'll automatically apply sometimes for a certain pay or whatever else. And it's a little annoying, yes, but I mean, it's how the industry works right now. But mine is mostly my description. Where I have is I describe what it is for a non-license, what it is for a license, and I let them know, this is what you could get paid. This is what kind of your bonus is going to look like. And I try to make it as fun and entertaining as I can. But it's straight to the point. When I had just a paragraph in my description, it didn't really bring a lot of people. When I actually broke it up and actually showed them what they'd be making and everything else, I actually got a lot more involvement or a lot more access that way.
Yeah, personalize it a little bit. Is that fair to say? That's awesome. Okay, and then you mentioned compensation too, like talking about this is what you can make, this is what top performers can make, these types of things. Did you do any compensation analysis like into your market in Portland when you're looking for someone, or when you started the process into improving your job ad? How deep did you look into compensation? Was it something that you had to, really take a look at and adjust, or was it more of like, hey, I've always had a good compensation plan, I didn't really need to change anything there?
Well, it was more in the lines of talking with different agents, trying to get their compensation plan and what it was around my area, and then
Got it.
looking at me and just being like, okay, when it comes to insurance, and a lot of people, they want that high base, but when you work in insurance and you're a salesperson that was hiring for, your commission is going to be where you're getting the most money. You're going to get a lower base. It's just how it works. And you have to find the right person for that. Because there's a lot of people that turned it down just because of that reason. I was like, well,
Yeah,
okay, then you're not a salesperson. That's not the position that I'm hiring for.
sure. Yeah, that's a good note too. Yeah, and I agree with you too. It's like for sales positions, you want someone who believes in themselves to make up the difference, right? Or to an extent, of course, right? But you want someone who sees that opportunity, sees the commission percentages and is doing the numbers in their head, and they're like, yeah, if I do what I know I can do, I'm going to knock this out of the park, right? So I totally agree with you in terms of using that as a method to be able to determine if someone's a good fit, right? Because you mentioned being a good fit or not for that. But let's talk about once they've started applying, you personalize the job ad, put in the compensation. Once the candidates begin to apply, of course, you have the assessment at your disposal and utilizing that, I'm sure, and I'm sure you'll talk about the validity that you have there. But what else do you do as a part of the interviewing process to determine whether or not a candidate's a good fit?
Well, I'll do a phone interview, of course, at first. And I usually have like certain questions that I'll ask to try to get
Sure.
an idea of what they're looking for. My main question that I ask is trying to understand if they even know what they're applying for. It's like, what do you know about the insurance industry? And I want them to tell me about it. Um, and then also too is like, what motivates you? What are you really looking for within this insurance industry and everything else? What do you want this job to do for you?
Sure.
I let them know that this is kind of like I'm bringing I'm trying to find a person that's going to work well with my team. We're a team environment. That's how we succeed as being a team. And then after I do my phone interviews and everything else, and I had to step back a little bit with IdealTraits and everything else, the email functionality and everything else is nice, but I usually tend to use my Outlook or my normal email. And then within it, I've used, I think it's called activities or something like that, or comments. I'll usually put that in there. So that way I'm keeping track of what I'm doing. It's like, hey, I emailed them this, or I called them and did this, or whatever else. That way those notifications are there. So when I go back to the job, because you're not going to remember everything. You're doing a ton of things as an agent. So you go back and you're like, oh, I've done this to this candidate, or I've done this to this candidate. So I'm trying to
Yeah.
keep notes on different things.
Yep. And that's a good point too, right? Because the organization of it all is difficult because it sounds as if it's you alone handling the recruiting process, right? And then you're working with, let's say, 5, 6, 7 different candidates at a time, and it can get incredibly overwhelming, and conversations can get lost. So for those of you listening, Rose is alluding to the comments and activity section within the candidate profile, and she's leaving notes based off of emails that she's sending through her Outlook, conversations that she's having, these types of things to stay up to date on where the candidates are at. Maybe what she liked, what she didn't like, I'm sure is what you're putting in there too. But okay, good.
Exactly. I keep notes on my side too, but that just lets me know when I'm going in. I'm like, oh, okay, that's the conversation I had with them. That's right. Okay. But
Yep.
after that, it's just more in the lines of bringing them in for an interview, trying to, if they're a really good fit, whatever else. But most of the time during that phone interview process, it's if I like them, I'm going to let them know, hey, I do not hire unless you're licensed. And at that point, we have that very hard conversation or a very good conversation. And I have to put that boundary up. I have to be like, no, I'm not going to hire you unless you're licensed. And if
Yeah.
they're willing to go and do that, that means they want this position. They want this as a career, and it's not just another job.
And it sounds as if you're being incredibly transparent with them too, which I'm sure is something that you've done on purpose. Because I know you said that, of course, before coming an agency owner, you spent a lot of time at agencies, right? and then of course, took the leap, decided to do it for yourself, which is fantastic. So talk about, I guess, that experience that you had at an agency before coming in owner. I know you mentioned that the support that you were given at the beginning helped now you put that as a part of your process, right? In terms of helping people get licensed and giving them that support. So is there anything else maybe before you became an agency owner that you experienced that you took note of that's like, I got to put this as a part of my process when I start staffing and recruiting?
I think the main thing was with all the different changes and everything else that happened within our most offices that I worked with was the turnover rate when it came to candidates coming in and they're not licensed, because of the fact that they're in an environment with you where you're learning too much from the people around you, and then when you go to take that test, it's extremely hard to pass that test at that point because you've learned too much in the office and you've learned it the wrong way, I should say, because you're learning it the
That
American
happens.
way or the State Farm way or whatever else. And then you go to take the Oregon test or whatever state you're in, that test, and it's going to be a lot harder. So with my experience, I took the licensing and the test and everything else before I even looked for an insurance job. Someone told me like that's the best way to do it. And I was
Sure.
like, okay, I'm going to do that. So I did. I passed, went into a job and everything else, and it moved a lot faster. And then all my experience with other agents, when they bring them on, they're non-licensed, it was just a very slow process, and it's more difficult sometimes unless you have you had to have a very stern process in place. Like, you need to get licensed in a week, you need to get licensed a month, and you have to stick with that. You cannot wiggle. Even if you like the candidate, they have to show you they're willing to do the work to get it done. And I've had
Yeah.
people get licensed in a week, I've had people get licensed in a month, but we were very stern on them, and that worked. But the people that didn't want it and didn't want to achieve it, they just weren't right for a good fit. Even though you like the candidate, you have to let them go if they're not a good fit and they're not willing to put that work in to get it done.
So true. And I love how a majority of this conversation over the last 22 minutes has been geared towards unlicensed talents, helping them get licensed, right? Because I think it's fair to say that, let's say you weren't willing to provide this support, you most likely wouldn't have had this success. Is that fair to say? Like, if you were only looking for licensed candidates, weren't willing to talk to a candidate unless they had a license, would you say that it's
Well,
fair to say that you wouldn't have the same success?
that that is a hard part in itself. And that's where when I took on the how do I say this? So when I started in January, I really had to sit down with myself and be like, okay, you have been through a lot of experience where you have hired people that have had licenses. And the thing is with that is it's great, but you have to think about all the habits you have to break if they've been licensed. Also, too, they're wanting a very high pay. I cannot do that as a new agent. And I mean, bringing someone on, if you're like an agent that's been around for a while, that's great. You're bringing on a licensed person, it's going to be wonderful, but you're going to have to break a lot of habits, and that's hard. And I know that bringing on a new person, you're going to have to train them, but they're an open book, they're a blank slate. It's really easy to train them in your processes. I've had a lot of people that I brought on that were licensed that I had to break habits and like, well, that doesn't work out. I don't want to do it that way. I'm like, but that's how this office does it. So I need you to do it that way. And sometimes they would leave because of that.
Uh,
But, you know, we had to be hard because we had a certain place we were running things, we had a certain process, and we had to stick to it. And if you know insurance and you've been in insurance, you know this.
mhm, this is true. Yeah, and I mean, so we've talked about job ads, we've talked about interviewing, we've talked about all that good stuff. Where do you stand? We talked about licensing versus unlicensed, and that was some great stuff there. Where do you stand on remote? I know that I know for the conversations that we've had, I know that the staff that you brought on has been in office.
Yeah.
But as you take a look at it seems like you've adapted well with the license unlicensed things. Where do you stand on remote? Is it something that you might consider in the future? Is it something that you're ready for now, or are just the system's not in place, but it's maybe something that we'll investigate down the road?
It's probably definitely something I'd investigate down the road. But when it comes to remote, it's it's definitely a challenge because it depends on who you're bringing on, if they're licensed or non-licensed. If they're licensed, you can kind of train them remotely and it's a little easier. If they're not licensed, you have to take into account that you're most likely going to have to bring that person in um, to train them for a good month or two, and then they can work remotely. But if they're like in a different state or something, you just have to know if you're bringing them on unlicensed, you're going to have a lot of video chats with them.
Yeah, right.
So,
Because you just have to adapt, right? Like if they're not coming to the office every day, what can you do to make them still feel as if they're part of a team in a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting or whatever your preferred video, I guess, use or provider is, that creates an environment that still makes people feel a part of it. So I guess if, like, let's say a licensed candidate in the state of Michigan emailed you today, um, and they were licensed, but they were in Michigan and wanted to work for your office, would you bring them on or would you turn them away for right now because the systems aren't in place?
well, I mean, the systems are in place. I could easily do it. I could easily work them through, but I would be like I am with everybody that I try to hire. I'm very straightforward and understanding about, okay, this is what's going to happen. And these are the processes within the office and everything else to where it's um, I am not going to be a micromanager, but on the other hand too, I have to know that you're online. So this is the process, or this is what I'll be looking for, that you're online, that you're working, that you're taking care of all the tasks that you need to take care of and everything else. So there will be certain things that are in place before I hire them. They'll know what their responsibilities are.
Oh man, which is so important, right? Because if they don't know what you're you're looking for, how are they supposed to get it done, right? We think it's easy. It's just like show up and do your job. It's like, okay, but like what does that entail, right? And I think that's brilliant that you are setting the stage right from the beginning, right? And in a way, I suppose, nipping it in the bud for lack of better terms, right? In terms of like, here's what I'm expecting of you. Please make sure that it's done because this is the way that I am determining whether or not you're doing what I'm expecting you to do. Is that fair?
Well, no, it is fair because the main thing is I've learned very early on is you can't assume anything. Um, you can't assume that a person's going to do the jobs you want them to do. You have to put your expectations forward. And once you put your expectations forward and they can't accomplish those expectations, they're not a good fit. I've never really tried to assume that a person's going to do what I want them to do unless I've told them, okay, I want you to do this, this, and this, A, B, and C.
It's terrific. Being transparent. If for those that are listening, whether it's live or in the recording, being transparent is a key to success. Engaging in transparency helps candidates know where you're at and allows them to really take a deeper look at whether or not it's something that they want. And if they don't, it's okay. But at least you know if they do, you have an employee that knows what you expect of them. That's awesome. Well, Rose, the last 28 minutes has really flown by. And the last question that I know that I prepared you for was any
Uh-oh.
advice or the advice that you have towards business owners, agency owners out there alike that are maybe they're just getting started with hiring or they're struggling or maybe they've had success and are just looking for some advice. What is your advice towards success? What is the one thing that you would recommend that every agency, every business owner does in order for them to have success when it comes to staffing and recruiting?
So, one of the few things that I've heard a lot and I took to heart is slow to hire, quick to fire. That's really, you know, don't jump in to hire someone right away, even though you really need it, even though you're swamped, even though you're struggling and you need someone really bad. Don't just hire someone. You really need to find that right person or someone that's really going to help out your office, because you hire someone and they don't work out or they're not doing your job or anything else, you're just babysitting. Don't babysit someone. You need to do your job, they need to do theirs. And you need to find a person that's actually going to be a part of your team, because you're part of the team as well and you guys need to work well together. Is, I guess, a wrap of what I've said so far.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, Rose, thank you again for joining me and on this inaugural first success spotlight. I really appreciate you having patience with the process and making time to be here today. And for those of you again that are listening live or listening to the recording, maybe at a later time, there was a lot of great stuff that was unpacked here. I know it's hard to really retain in the last 30 minutes, but talking about pre-licensing benefits through IdealTraits, we have both Excel solutions and Exam FX, excuse me, that are on there. So if you're looking for resources to begin supporting maybe unlicensed or inexperienced candidates with getting started in the industry, those are both exceptional resources that Rose talked about today. And then if you're looking for support when it comes to training new employees within your IdealTraits platform, both RPOA as well as Insurance Sales Labs are, again, both great resources to help you continually educate your staff and support them. So a lot of great things, from helping with licensing to creating attractive job ads, interviewing process, and then of course being slow to hire and quick to fire. So Rose, thank you again. Congratulations on your year anniversary, as I know I told you several times over the past couple of weeks. But seriously, congratulations to all of your success over the last year and a couple of months, and I'm sure it will do nothing but continue. So for those of you, again, listening or watching the recording, our next Success Spotlight is going to be on Wednesday, March 13th at 2 o'clock with Jason Kilgo, who is an independent insurance agent out of the great state of Virginia. So marketing and emails registration will come out soon. But Rose, to end it, thank you again for joining me. I appreciate you sharing your insight to your processes to how you've seen success over the last year and a couple of months. And again, I'm sure that will do nothing but continue. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to let us know. But you will receive a recording following, and we look forward to seeing you on Wednesday, March 13th at 2 o'clock for me and Jason Kilgo for our second Success Spotlight. Thank you again, Rose.